remarks. Holding a microphone, it's quite a challenge. Let me begin, ladies and gentlemen, by expressing my greetings to you all. I'll begin by saying, as some of you have said already, Sanbonani, Molweni, Dumelang, Assalamu alaikum, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, bonjour, bon dia, good morning, and welcome to you all. I wish to begin by recognizing His Excellency Ambassador Mpoko, who I understand is present here by virtue of being the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. I had not, Ambassador, expected any diplomat to be here because I wanted to meet civil society. But when I queried your presence, I was told you're so senior as an ambassador that the ordinary minister cannot keep you out. And thus I accept your presence here. Thank you very much for being with us. I then wish to recognize any other colleagues and excellencies that might have decided to be here. I suspect there are none. Could I also then welcome the chairperson of the African Diaspora Forum and all the members of the various organizations that are represented here. I do have a list of all of you. I don't want to go through it, but I wish to begin by expressing my sincere welcome and my thanks to each and every one of you for having come here today. It's not my intention to keep you for very long at this meeting, but I wish to allay any concern by indicating to you that this is not the last time we will meet. And you can be assured of that. We will not be able to deal with all that confronts us today, but this is not the last time we meet. So thank you very much for honoring my invitation to this meeting. You might be aware that 2 weeks ago I had a meeting with diplomats of all the various countries represented in our country, South Africa. The aim of the meeting was to discuss and share information on the tragic acts of anti-African violence that occurred in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal early this month. I had hoped that our excellencies would assist my department and ministry in devising impactful responses to these very troubling challenges. In the course of our discussions with their excellencies, several matters of concern were raised. Among them was the fact that it is not the first time DIRCO had called such a meeting, nor the first time DIRCO had had such deliberations with the diplomatic corps represented in our country. It was also indicated that despite various agreements on proposed joint actions, there had been insufficient follow-through, action, or monitoring. The events that occurred just a few short weeks ago are truly regrettable and embarrassing for a country with a proud liberation history such as South Africa, a country with an association with heroes and heroines such as Pixley Gaisaka Seme, Marcus Garvey, Sylvester Williams, W.E.B. Du Bois, Dudley Thompson, Julia Cooper, Charlotte Maxeke, Oliver Tambo, Jomo Kenyatta, Amika Cabral, Abidias do Nascimento, Lillian Ngoyi, Julius Nyerere, Martin Luther King, Steve Biko, our Tata Nelson Mandela, Ben Bala, Gamal Abdel Nasser, to mention just a few of those who've been a shining light in the consideration of liberation and revolution. These leaders had a vision. They wanted to see the liberation of black people from all forms of bondage, humiliation, and degradation. They wanted to see black people, regardless of borders, being treated with respect and dignity. I believe our task is to act to make this vision of theirs a reality. These leaders wanted to see Africa taking its rightful place in global affairs. And they wanted an Africa that is not impoverished through the endless exploitation of its raw materials for the benefit of others and not the benefit of Africans. They wanted to see an end to dependency and underdevelopment, and that we would replace the status with a new Africa that has control over its natural resources, and that this control is wielded in the interest and benefit of the people of Africa. Now, all of you would agree that the violence and hatred we witnessed points to the need for much more deliberate attention to developing African consciousness and to promoting the ideals of Pan-Africanism and African unity as the foundation for African development. I'm sure all gathered in this room would agree that there is no African country that can develop on its own, that our history requires that we work in a much more united fashion than we have done up to this moment in order to achieve the outcomes of development that we dearly desire for our continent, for our people, and of course for our nations. I and all who work within DIRCO believe that we cannot sit back and do nothing. And I believe we need your advice as to the actions we might consider setting in motion to prevent further tragedies. What then is the challenge before us? The escalation of violence, intimidation, and death that we witnessed recently requires us to avoid the pointing of fingers and needs us to find ways of reaching out to all our communities. I've had many fingers pointed at me. I've had all sorts of fake and real news on YouTube. I've been called names and so on. I don't think all of this is helpful in resolving what we must. What we've got to do is find a way of identifying the origin and source of the antagonism and anger. I firmly support police action against the perpetrators of crime. We've had many suspects arrested, and I am looking to our justice system to ensure that these suspects will appear in court speedily and that they will be imprisoned if they are found guilty. But we need to find a way of going beyond that. Community members in some areas of South Africa are feeling alienated and displaced. They feel they lack opportunity. They feel they lack jobs. Those who come to live in our country feel that they live in fear, they live in an atmosphere of rejection. All of this must be addressed by us. While the attacks are aimed largely at African migrants in our country, it's also been true that many South African citizens are also among the victims. When you have wanton violence, the violence goes to every person and doesn't go to where the person imagines they're targeting it. And we've seen that in these awful events. The fact that the violence is associated with theft, with destruction of property, and with murder points to motives other than simply saying it's a hatred of non-South African. So I've asked that we meet with you, as I've been told that there are several organizations in our country that work closely with both South African and non-South African communities, and that out of your experience, you may have proposals as to how we can work with you to develop interventions that will help us to stop this hatred and conflict. South Africa cannot continue to be defined in this way, nor can the events we see continue to be repeated and then forgotten for a few years. This can't be how we are characterized or understood by the world. So I wish to say to you that I would like us to really work at developing a collaborative partnership. And I look forward in the discussion we'll have, which is a beginning, my dear brother, as to how we could begin to work toward finding solutions to our challenges. You do know that I'm supposed to be in New York at this moment, preparing for something I've never had to do before. But I delayed my departure because I felt I can't go until I speak to my African brothers and sisters, and hence my delay. We, therefore, are confronted with the challenge of defeating the political and socio-economic conditions which, as we speak, condemn the majority of our fellow humans, particularly in the poorest of our countries, to conditions similar to the ones that many of our own people experienced on the slave ships that took our people away from the continent. The African agenda needs to begin to enable us to successfully fight this state of existence, which is unacceptable for our people, a state in which they lived as though imprisoned in a bar, in a single jail cell, with no opportunity, with no chance of a different livelihood. We know as well that in many of our countries, not enough is being done to pursue economic development, to ensure that our people have opportunity. Not enough is being done to cooperate, to instill our young people and give them the power to determine the direction of their lives independently. We have to find the means to make these things happen for our people. We've got to end the existence that makes our people as Africans suffer endlessly from economic stagnation, from crime, and from many preventable and curable diseases. The condition of our continent must change, and we must send a clear message to all our leaders. We expect this change, not just in South Africa, but in all the countries on the African continent. No leader should be allowed to get away with allowing degradation and expecting someone else to provide the response to their countrymen and women. All our leaders must commit to the development of all our people, and we must put that on their agenda as well. I believe, too, As I've said in previous meetings, we need as well to be honest and to find solutions to the management of migration on our continent. We need to talk about the role that sending countries and transit countries play in assisting receiving countries such as South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and many others, and in helping them to manage the issue of migration far more effectively. Our continent's first Nobel Peace Prize laureate and former President General of the African National Congress, Chief Albert Luthuli, said very profound words when receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 1961. I notice in Parliament they've got a way when they quote someone, they say, I open quotes, and then they go da 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 da, and then they say, I close quotes. Now, I taught English, and if you quote someone, you place quotation marks. I'm not used to saying I open quotes, I close quotes. I use quotation marks. Chief Albert Luthuli said the following: Africa is a vital subject matter in the world of today. That was in 1961. A focal point of world interest and concern. Could it not be that history has delayed her rebirth for a purpose? The situation confronts her with inescapable challenges, but more importantly, with opportunities for service to herself and mankind. She evades the challenges and neglects the opportunities to her shame, if not her doom. How she sees her destiny is a more vital and rewarding quest than bemoaning her past with its humiliations and sufferings. I think that quote should be circulated to all of us as we reflect on what we need to do. This was said in 1961. It remains relevant today. And what confronts us, we must not have a need 50 years down the line to have Africans citing this quote of 1961. We must create the conditions where 50 years down the line, when our people speak of Africa, they are saying we honored the promise, and that the condition they have 50 years hence is radically different from the one that the majority of our people experience. We can't keep referring to our old leaders as though that makes us honorable. What we should be referring to are the advances we are ensuring are made, because we live to change condition. We don't live to reflect upon it. So let me conclude by saying, it is my belief that we as Africans are a people with a common past, and as I've articulated many times, I certainly believe we are a people and a continent with a common future. I believe we have no choice but to be united, no choice but to work together for our common good, and no choice but to work to rewrite the story of our continent. I work every day with the belief that we can be different and that we can make a difference. So indeed, I'm grateful that so many of you have come to meet with me this morning. My meetings are not going to end here, as I said, with yourselves. But I'm also going to be meeting members of the South African communities where we had this violence. because I want to develop a full understanding of what is actually going on. What is the experience and the thinking out there? And I believe in the goodness of humanity. And I think there's a way in which we should be able to find each other. There should be a way in which we can find a model of collaboration that will work for all of us. But we cannot do that by isolating ourselves from each other. And as I said to our ambassadors when I closed my remarks 2 weeks ago, I want us to build bridges. But I don't want it to be an engineering feat. I want us to build bridges and to walk across them so that we meet each other. That is what I'm hoping for. I know there are many, many issues. I'm not a Minister of Home Affairs. I've been in Home Affairs, but please don't raise individual problems around visas or permanent residence. It's not going to be helpful. I'm really looking for what are some of the steps we should consider as a next step that takes us to another point, and then from there we might take another one. We may begin small, but we must start doing. That is my desire, because it can't be satisfactory that a Minister of Foreign Affairs is spending over 10 days only talking about one matter. I'm not doing my job, and it's worrying me. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your contributions and our further. And now we will allow our colleagues from the media to allow us to continue with our meeting. And we thank you very much for your interest, and we hope you shall pull out the good from our speech and not the bad. Merci, monsieur. We have some roving mics here, and our staff are going to help us. And we're going to ask for a few hands.